Now, one thing I wanted to go over with you too is I think a lot of cults have similar to a narcissistic cycle of abuse where there's love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. How did
Hmm.
this particular cult, how did they recruit new members?
If anybody stopped by into the church, 100% it was like we were trained to love bomb them. We were trained to reach out to them. We were trained to show them love. Jesus' love, God's love. Just we would be trained to be like, what are your needs? We will fulfill your needs. It's almost like a miracle. It's because God loves you. So we're going to give you the groceries. We're going to give you the ride. We're going to give you whatever you need. We're going to love on you and make you feel amazing. And then you will get hooked. And then you will get dependent on us. And then you will come back. And then you will start seeing that there are rules. And you have to walk a fine line. And, we're all watching you. And you can't leave. You can't get out, you
How
know?
would they make people dependent on them?
I mean, people that came into the church sometimes were truly people that had needs, like real needs. I mean, everybody has needs,
Right.
but let's just say, like, oh, your car needs to be fixed. This dude on the church, directory, he will do it for free for you, just out of the goodness of his heart, because he is a servant of the Lord. So it's like you can get plugged into this, directory where all of these people down the list are going to help you for free. They're going to help you for free because they have been trained and taught to do that is, what Jesus wants you to do. What Jesus wants you to be his servant. That's the environment of this group. So they would do things for people, but it was a community where everyone's doing things for each other, but it comes at a huge cost to be a part of the community. Huge
Sure.
cost.
Strings attached, giving with strings attached, we'll call it.
Yes. Yeah. And then the devaluing was just happened constantly. They would build you up, reward you, and then knock you down. And then it's like you have to grovel to come back. So, I mean, it's very much I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if I found out, like, oh, all the leaders of this group were narcissists. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all whatsoever.
No,
I feel like I was
not at
raised by
all.
narcissists, because they would be so ruthless. It's so cruel and so unempathetic to the people that they were really harming, and they were so ignorant at how much harm they really, really were causing. There are a lot of people still suffering from the trauma and the abuse that happened in this group, and a lot of these people, they don't want to talk about it. They want to uh, sweep it under the rug, and I was not going to allow that to happen. I had to find out more, and there's still stuff that hasn't been uncovered yet. There's a lot more that hasn't been uncovered yet, but a lot of people don't want to talk about this group. They just want it to just go away and just move on. People think that they can just move on. You can't just
Sure.
move on from this kind of abuse. You can't just move on. You have to
No.
heal.
I think it's one of those things where unless someone's been through it, it's going to be really difficult to understand the extent of it. So, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, even because people that have been in a situation like that, there's probably not that much information out there on it, for one. And for two, there's nothing like someone who has been through the same thing. And you'll be able to reach people and communicate with people in a way that only someone who has been through it could. So there's other versions of cults out there, like you said the name Hibbert before, which always reminds me of Scientology. I don't know if there's a connection there, but there is a bunch of groups like that now, that there's people that are struggling, that are either there and want to get out, or they've gotten out but are still experiencing the residual effects. It's heartbreaking and tough.
Yeah, when I released the podcast at the beginning of it, it was 2019. I got a lot of um, messages and just from people all over the world that were basically saying that this doesn't just speak to them as a survivor of a cult, this actually helps them with their situation of domestic violence, in a relationship, or, just coercive control, basically, coercive control can happen in a, love relationship, or a dynamic with anybody, with a friendship, with a with a boss, with, it's that experience that you were mentioning of the love bombing, devaluing, discarding, love bombing, devaluing, discarding. Like, it's just that cycle, that I think really speaks to people.
I mean, there's a ton of overlap between a situation like you grew up in and someone who's in a domestic violence or domestic abuse scenario. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
similarities between the two. And in your immediate family, what, like your parents, you were much closer with your father, but then he left, right? And so then you weren't really allowed to talk to him.
Well, basically, like, as I was kind of saying before, there's an understanding that if someone leaves, you can't really communicate with them anymore, because they're not going to heaven anymore. They're not on the right path. They might mess you up. They might, they're very much demonized at that point. So I knew, in order to protect myself, that I was not going to be able to stay in touch with him. So there was a gap of time that I was not communicating with him. My parents got divorced and my father left, and it's a whole story that you can hear. The first episode is my story. It's called Naomi, and it's my story, and you can hear the whole story. But basically, yeah, he left, and there was a period of time that I didn't communicate with him. My mother, I went no contact with her this year. Um, I won't get really into my relationship with her, because I'm still I have basically a gaping mother wound, is what I have realized. And I'm still, like, in the trenches with healing from that. And it's a big one, Luckily, I'm really lucky to say that I do not have daddy issues. I'm so thankful. I'm one of those lucky ones that can honestly say, especially after my father passed away, like, holy cow, I was so lucky to have him in my life, because he and my brother, they were both the kind of people where they had very gentle souls, and they very romantic, sweet, tender, sensitive, gentle souls. And I'm so lucky to have been in a home with those two people. I really am. Um, so, yeah.
So
But yeah,
your
there
father,
was a time.
did he want to, was he more breaking up with the church, or was it just as much with your mother at the same time? Where, like, did this problem start with his relationship with your mom? And then he was like, okay, this isn't working. And then he also realized at the same time, yeah, the church here, I'm not a fan of this either. So what was that part like?
Well, basically, my mom's side of the story is that my father, they had marital problems, and that my father wouldn't give her enough money for groceries, and it, like, stressed her out, and he was stingy, and stuff like that. My father was a mailman. She didn't really work. Maybe she worked part-time here and there, but basically we were basically a one income household. Um, and my father was a faithful mailman, and he was great at his job, never missed a day. But um, he was in a cult, and he did not trust these people. He did not trust my mother. He did not trust these people. He didn't trust my mother with money. He knew that the environment of the group was that you hand your money to these people if they ask for it. You do as they say. If they say, hey, I'm calling because Jesus told me to give all of your money to Susie for her daughter to get a coat, they drop everything and they do as they are told. They are Christian soldiers, and this is what they are doing. This is what they think is a soldier for Christ. So, or a servant of the Lord, whatever they think in their heads. So, my father just knew how off balance this was, but he had to pretend that it really took a toll on him to stay in this group. And to kind of fly under the radar. And I know exactly what kind of toll it takes because I had to do it. When I realized that the cult was a cult and I had to get out, I had to stay a little bit longer to get my ducks in a row, which I think a lot of people can relate to when they're like in an abusive situation
Sure.
where it's like, oh shoot, this is abusive. I got to get out. The light bulb's gone on and now I got to get my ducks in a row. And now I have to act normal and not let anybody see that I know. Oh, shoot. So it is very taxing and tolling and can take a while to recover from just that alone. And my father never recovered from this whole thing. But when basically, long story short, and like I said, you can listen to my story on the first episode of my podcast. But my father was given an ultimatum. Like, if you're leaving the group, you're going to lose your wife and kids. So it's like, what are you going to do? And at that point, my father was like, I can't really take this anymore. So he decided to leave. And so he basically, lost his family. That's how it is. That's how it is. That's how it works.
Did he try to take any of you with him too? Did he offer to say, you know what, you guys can come with me too? Or
Oh,
did
that
he
was
just
not an
realize,
option. No,
okay.
that's not an option here. No,
No,
that was not an
I wouldn't
option.
think they would let it happen, right? It would have to be like totally against their wishes. They would have to like
Oh,
really
yeah.
buck the grain there.
You have to understand this group is very powerful. These are people that the leaders of this group, they all had businesses in the community. They were business owners. Um, and they had money. And no one was ever going to be able to. There was so much fear as well about these people because things got so dark with them that no, that was not even an option to fight for your kids, really. No.
Now, in terms of your friends, there was a lot of like a us versus them dynamic where they didn't even want to have you talking to anybody that you weren't actively recruiting to be a part of the church.
Yeah. So we weren't really encouraged to have any school friends. Unless, our real friends, our real family were the people of the church, you
And
know.
how was that for you? What did that feel like for you? At this point, were you still, I guess this is something I should ask too. Were you completely bought into this the whole time? Or when did you start to kind of see through the cracks?
So, I was born into this, so I really didn't have a choice in the matter. I was fed this. There was a lot of things that I was fed that were really messed up. So, like, I'll just give you an example. It was basically taught to me at home that all of the things that I was being taught at school were not the truth. So it was weird. It was like, science was considered like a sin. Like, it's a sin for me to educate myself. I was going to public school, but it was like a sin for me to educate myself about, like the universe and the sky and like planets and dinosaurs, and it's just none of it is real, because the only thing that's real is the Bible, and that's the only thing that's real. So, and that is up for interpretation by these people. So, their word is God, not any of this education at school. So, we were just kind of isolated with educating ourselves, isolated from our extended family, isolated from friends. But they didn't ever say, you are not allowed to be friends with this person. They just are just like, oh, that's your decision. It's just a ton of gaslighting. Just like, oh,
Mm.
that's your decision. And just a lot of intimidation, just real intimidation tactics of you just being really scared that something bad is going to happen to you. And it's just such an unstable situation where you're just not knowing what to do all the time, and you're just kind of checking for people's moods and energy, and just, am I okay? Is what I'm doing okay? You're just afraid, walking on eggshells, afraid to make the next move. So it, you know, you got to tread very, very lightly with being friends with someone. You got to tread very, very, very lightly with any little decision you made. Like, you
I see.
could not step out of line in any way. But like I said before, there wasn't really like a list of rules. Like, hey, you're not allowed to associate with these people from school. There was never a written list of rules like that. It's just what was expected, and just, an unsaid thing.